Chapter 91. Preparing for the game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 91. Preparing for the game. For the next few days, Ling Pingan stayed upstairs. Apart from going downstairs to get takeout, he was busy preparing all kinds of historical materials and materials for the Song dynasty. In less than 2 days, his bedroom was filled with all kinds of historical books. There were the orthodox Su Ziji Tongjian and History of Song, as well as all kinds of unofficial histories and jokes. There were also the notes of scholars at that time, as well as all kinds of papers and research reports downloaded from the internet. There were also various maps hanging on the wall of the bedroom. They were basically the boundaries of the Song dynasty, the administrative regions, and the surrounding regions, as well as the traffic routes. In short, he had already done sufficient preparation. Now, all that was left was to determine the time and the identity of the main character. However, there was no rush. Ling Pingan took out his phone and looked at the icon of the Nightmare Legend on it. It was already counting down. In another hour, he would be able to enter the virtual reality game world again and happily mow the grass. The last game experience was really great. So much so that even though a week had passed, he was still basking in the glow of it. So, he put down the work at hand. Holding his phone, he prepared to connect to the ring watch of the virtual reality game. Then, he quietly waited for the game to open. In the depths of Chang'an, the array formations of the star Han Xiaofu covered everything. Lu Ji stood in front of a divine kiln and watched as a clay figurine he had just made was sent into the divine kiln. He picked up a pen and began to record on a bamboo slip. The 30-second firing experiment. The clay figurine is in good condition. The divine kiln is in good condition. The divine kiln is charged. Finally, these words were condensed into one word on the bamboo slip. This was the great creation of the Tianshang dynasty. Long before the ancestral dragon descended into the world, the dynasty called Tianshang ruled this land. The royal family of Tianshang was the descendants of the heavenly phoenix. Hence, they brought the words of the heavenly phoenix to the human world. This spell condensed countless words into a single word by writing them on a special bamboo slip. It could even be encrypted. No one could see the condensed content of the words after the encryption, other than the person who wrote the words and the person who knew the password. Therefore, in the Tianshang dynasty, magic was knowledge that only nobles and priests could master. The commoners had never even heard of it. Only when the ancestral dragon came into the world did the situation change. The ancestral dragon brought paper and the printing technique. He swept across the feudal vassals, unified the country, and established the immortal Qin. Then, he forcefully ordered the nobles and priests who had previously mastered magic to hand over their passwords and books. Those who did not obey would die. They would die along with their spells and passwords. This was the famous burning of books and burying of scholars. Lu Ji's eyes were fixed on the divine kiln. As the psionic power in the divine kiln began to overflow, a powerful spiritual fire rose up and gradually roasted the clay figurine that was mixed with special spiritual mud and various special metals, causing them to fuse together. Spiritual energy swam around their bodies, forming many special patterns. An hour later, the door of the divine kiln was opened. A red pottery figurine that was still emitting smoke walked out from it. The 2 agate stones inlaid in its eyes lit up. It knelt in front of its creator and bent its knees to worship. Lu Ji watched with both joy and regret. He was happy that he had finally succeeded, but regretful that the terracotta figurine he had refined was not the same as the one that the ancestral dragon had refined. It could only understand simple commands and carry out basic tasks. It could not do the same as the ancestral dragon's terracotta soldier corps and the bronze legions. It could carry out orders and tasks on its own and make corresponding judgments. Legend has it that the ancestral dragon refined 3 kinds of terracotta warriors. What I refine today should be the first kind of terracotta warriors that the ancestral dragon refined. So. Lu Zhu touched the book in his hand. It's the notes of the ancestral dragon at the beginning. Han Li jumped down from the tall building and landed steadily on the ground. The murmurs in her ears had helped her identify all the ghosts and evil spirits nearby. You can't run away. Han Li held the spirit blade and ran rapidly in a certain direction. As she ran, she added a seal to herself. This was a spell that she had learned from practicing the spiritual sacrifice of the Deathwalker. And thus was its name, Gift of the Wind. Thus, her slender and beautiful legs were blessed and cherished by the wind. Every step she took was as light as an elf. She could now dance on the palm of the king like the swallows in the Han Palace in ancient times. However, she now used this artistic footwork to track her enemy. An evil wizard who manipulated corpses and undead spirits. Thud thud thud. She stepped over a collapsed wall, and the spirit blade cut open the clumsy and ridiculous maze it had set up. She completely exposed a base that the Lich had been operating in this area for a long time in broad daylight. After discovering that its spell had been destroyed, the monster holding a staff made of human bones raised its head. The ghost fire in its eyes looked at the demon hunters rushing toward it and immediately began to cast spells in a hurry. Fear. It chanted a spell, and a mass of greenish-gray spiritual energy overflowed from its body. F***CK. It grew a bony finger and released a mass of greenish-gray gas. Lightning. A bolt of lightning was released from its staff. If an ordinary demon hunter was caught off guard, they would definitely suffer a great loss. They might even be defeated by these 3 moves in one move. However, the murmurs in Han Li's ears had already told her the characteristics and spells of the monster. She jumped up lightly and threw out the spirit blade in her hand. With powerful psionic power, she stabbed at the monster's fragile eye socket. At the same time, under the protection of the wind, she quietly and quickly approached the monster's back. Before the monster could react, a scarlet long whip was rolled up in Han Li's hand. Crackle. The long whip completely wrapped around the monster's head. At this moment, the spirit blade that was thrown out came too late and pierced into the monster's pitch-black eye socket. Boom! The Lich's skeleton shattered all over the ground. But it was still not dead. On the skull that had turned into white bones, the upper and lower jaw bones opened and closed as it said, "Succubus. Who do you report to?" "I'm a human." Han Li stepped on its bones. "The human who hunted you." "Ha!" The Lich's jaw let out a mocking smile. "Human. This world will become a part of the Great Abyss sooner or later. Human, your flesh and soul will become nutrients for the eternal abyss. You can't even do anything to me." It was a Lich. It had already hidden its phylactery in the abyss. Even if it died here, its soul would be resurrected in the abyss. "Is that so?" Han Li smiled. It was a very cute smile. She whispered in her ears. Under the urging of the ravings, she squatted down on her increasingly plump body and grabbed the head. She looked at the Lich's head. "You think hiding the phylactery in the abyss is foolproof?" "Wrong." And so she held the head and placed a strange symbol on the ground with its bones. It was a small invention designed by for abyssal creatures. A scientific, safe, and effective creation. Then, she threw the Lich's head into it. She began to recite words of unknown meaning. As she chanted, the symbols on the ground gradually flashed. The Lich only knew at this moment that something was wrong. But it was too late. Its bones turned to ashes in the light, along with its phylactery hidden in the abyss. When the light dissipated, there was only a round, white walnut-like object on the ground. That was the Lich's brain nucleus, Mr. Amr's masterpiece. Chu Weiwei sat in the bedroom, looking at the clock on the wall. The clock ticked slowly to 11 o'clock. The nightmare mark on her wrist began to burn. "I wonder if I can meet Senior again this time," Chu Weiwei thought. A few days ago, the news of the monk named Fa Hai killing the werewolf Duke William and subduing the Headless Horseman Hill in Kunlun province had long spread throughout the black-clothed guards. Unfortunately, this monk was hard to find. No one knew where he was or where he went. Only Chu Weiwei vaguely guessed that he was probably in that so-called nightmare world. Chapter 92. Dragon of Nightmares. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 92. Dragon of Nightmares. He held on to his phone and sat on the sofa. He looked at the time on his phone that had slowly ticked towards 11 o'clock. When the countdown on the game icon of Legend of Nightmares reached 0, Ling Pingan immediately clicked on the icon. Then, he received a notification. Please connect to the virtual gaming device. He immediately took out the watch that he had prepared beforehand and tapped it on his phone. Then, he received a notification. The virtual gaming device has connected. Cluck. 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 A strange sound came from the phone. Ling Pingan felt his vision black out. The next moment, a place appeared in front of him. The voice of the elf guide was heard. Greetings, dear player, welcome back to the Legend of Nightmare, I am your elf guide. A character interface immediately appeared in front of him. This is the character that you chose to keep away from the keyboard the last time. It showed a strong-built monk that seemed to be meditating somewhere in the interface. The words, cultivating away from keyboard, appeared on the left side of the interface. There were many records under this notification box, all of which were of the rewards during the process of cultivation away from the keyboard. Before Ling Pingan had time to look carefully, his sight was occupied by a notification box. Your game character, Monk Fa Hai, has obtained the Golden Nightmare Lottery opportunity in the previous game, and can now be used. You can choose to use it immediately, or you can choose to invest 150,000 Nightmare points to upgrade it into a Nightmare Premium gift coupon. Official notification of Legend of Nightmare. You can become more powerful by topping up. Ling Pingan curiously clicked on the so-called Nightmare Premium gift coupon and received a notification. Nightmare Premium gift coupon. The official's only premium gift coupon. Use. Immediately conduct a special lottery draw and draw a rare and hidden Nightmare Premium gift coupon. Ling Pingan immediately smiled. As expected, this game's official is also thinking about earning money. Considering the current situation, most of the best-selling games in the Federal Empire had the shadow of the Federal Empire's imperial family behind them. There was even a legend that many of the designs for Mobile Legend, Dota, and LOL, were left behind by Emperor Taizu. In some of the unofficial histories which were made up as if it was true. It was said that Taizu held on to Taizong's hand before he died and said, "After I die, you must work hard. After the games were produced, remember to ask your descendants to burn them for me. I want to play them in the world after death." It was as if that time, these guys were hiding under Taizu's bed or nestling on the beam of his bedroom, listening to his last words. However, to Ling Pingan, it was something made up by those guys on the forum. But Ling Pingan scratched his head. Where can I get those 150,000 Nightmare points? A lame game. He cursed. I can't touch it even after I get it, so I might as well change the name to Legend of B***TCH. As soon as he finished cursing, another prompt popped up in front of him. Greetings, dear player. The profit that your game character, Monk Fa Hai, had earned during away from keyboard could be withdrawn your account. Then, a long summary like a bill appeared in front of Ling Pingan's eyes. Ling Pingan looked at it and was instantly delighted. This character of mine got almost 180,000 points just by cultivating away from keyboard. He looked at the entries on the bill. Monk Fa Hai killed XXX, picked up XXX, obtained XX points for Nightmare points, and sold equipment for XX points. He was immediately beamed with joy. Besides, the character managed to kill some monsters, and obtained several pieces of gold equipment. Among them, from a person called Werewolf Duke William, he even obtained a gold attribute high-grade set equipment. Gorgon's Sharp Claws. Just the set of equipment alone was valued by the realm at 100,000 points. That made Ling Pingan felt relieved. He immediately chose to withdraw the cash. Thus, the few nightmare points in Ling Pingan's instantly rose to 182,101 points. With so many points, he naturally wanted to use it up. He chose to upgrade the Golden Nightmare Lottery to the Nightmare Premium Gift Coupon. Instantly, countless fireworks exploded in front of his eyes. The voice of the elf guide reminded him on time. Dear player, you can now use the Nightmare Premium Gift Coupon. Official notification of Nightmare Legend. Nightmare Premium Gift Coupon. It is a rare hidden gift coupon in the system. Therefore, the player must use it within 15 minutes. Otherwise, the gift coupon will be switched to a lower rank coupon, the Nightmare Supreme Gift Coupon. Ling Pingan's expression changed slightly when he heard this. This stupid game is indeed not easy to deal with. He complained in his heart and clicked to use it. Thus, a large wheel appeared in front of him. One reward after another appeared around the wheel. Ling Pingan looked at it and was instantly overjoyed. He deeply felt the value of the 150,000 points. Because on the wheel, there was not only discretionary gold attribute points x 20/30/50. Some skills emitted golden light. Besides, what was even more eye-catching was that the turntable only took up about 1,000th of the position of a reward. Colorful and gorgeous special effects flashed in it. The name of the reward was Nightmare Game Character +2. The reward condition was also very straightforward. You could create 2 additional characters under your account. There was also a note below. Legend of Nightmare Game, using brainwave binding technology. Theoretically, each player was only allowed to have one account, and each account was only allowed to create one character. In other words, if Ling Pingan could get the reward, then his account would become unique. He would become the only player in this game, at least for now, who could create an alternate account. And to any game player, uniqueness was higher than any other attributes and equipment. After all, it was the thing that only he had and not others. Then even if it was a whiteboard, it would still be priceless. For example, Ling Pingan owned a skin in Mobile Legend. Because it was from the beta test version, the players who had this skin had a higher voice than others in the forums. Therefore, Ling Pingan's eyes were immediately attracted by the special reward. However, the probability. He looked at the reward of Nightmare Game Character +2, which only took up 1,000th of the area. Then, he took the initiative to ask the Elf Guide, do you have any items that can increase the probability of winning? Then, he got an answer, dear player, you can buy the Nightmare Dragon Pearl and gather 9 different types of Nightmare Dragon Pearl. Then, you can summon the Dragon God of Nightmare, so that your next draw will win the reward you want. Ling Pingan then asked, how much is this Nightmare Dragon Pearl? The guide elf replied, dear player, the Nightmare Dragon Pearl is sold only on the Nightmare Celebration Day. It seemed to be stuck for a moment, then, it continued, congratulations, dear player. Today is the Nightmare Celebration Day. Narako's happy moment. You have been selected as a special guest by the system. You can use the special guest invitation card to get a complete Dragon God of Nightmare for free. Ling Pingan was stunned. That's too good to be true. He kept feeling like it wasn't real. But when he thought about it seriously, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with it. Wasn't he chosen to test this game? What was it called? A beta tester, it was said so in the forum. Chapter 93. What the hell? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 93. What the hell? Thus, Ling Pingan immediately said to the elf guide, I'll use the Nightmare Special Guest Invitation card to exchange for the Dragon God of Nightmare then. After the elf guide paused for a while, he replied, dear player, I have already exchanged for you. Dragon God of Nightmare. Now, you can specify the reward that you want to win. Ling Pingan naturally did not hesitate to choose the Nightmare game character +2. A dragon's roar was heard, and then a golden light turned into a lock that locked the reward option that he had chosen. Then, the area occupied by the reward quickly expanded from 1,000th into the only reward on the roulette in front of him. Nightmare game character +2. Ling Pingan happily pressed the button. The roulette spun, and then, he received a notification. Dear player, congratulations. You have used the Nightmare Premium gift coupon to draw the Nightmare Mythical reward. Nightmare game character +2. You can now create a new character. Thus, the interface in front of him disappeared one after another. A new interface appeared, just like the first time he entered the game. The sinister song sounded again. Look up, sky is high, the night has fallen, the stars are everywhere, the paradise is gone, the judgment has arrived. Pairs of strange eyes opened around him. Then, an interface of character creating popped out. Just like last time, he had to design the figure of the character. Ling Pingan chose the gender first. He was surprised to find that in the Nightmare game, other than the male and female genders, there was a third choice. No gender. What kind of choice was that? Ling Pingan couldn't understand. However, considering that this was a game, he didn't take it seriously. Thus, he chose the male gender. Just as he was about to continue to create his character, the interface in front of him seemed to be disturbed by something and blurred. Then, he received a notification from the Nightmare game. Dear player, due to the Nightmare game character creation server being affected by an unknown reason, you will no longer be able to create your character. Your character image and attributes will be automatically created and assigned by the system. However, you can still use voice input to name the game character. Ling Pingan looked at it and suddenly felt inexplicable. He couldn't help but complain, what the hell? In the end, he received a notification from the system. Congratulations. Dear player, you have successfully named the game character. Game character. What the hell? The system is automatically creating. The system is automatically assigning attributes. The system is automatically assigning skills. After a moment, Ling Pingan realized that he seemed to be standing on the square from last time. Obviously, he had begun to officially operate the newly created character. He lowered his head and saw his thighs. They were unbelievably thick. Each thigh was at least twice as thick as an ordinary person. Then he looked at his waist, which was as big as a bucket. His chest was covered with chest hair, which was as thick as the weeds on the grassland. He stretched out his hand and saw two metal gloves that he didn't know what they were made from. The point was that there was a tattoo on both of his arms. These tattoos weren't dragon, tiger, or leopard tattoos. They were just words. The tattoo on his left arm read, I'm brutal and cunning. The tattoo on his right arm read, I'm cunning and brutal. An. Ling Pingan discovered that he had two heads. That was also discovered when he looked at the tattoos. The left head bumped into the right head. Then, the four eyes looked at each other. And so, he saw his two faces. What the F***ck, Ling Pingan felt too tired to complain. Even if Ling Pingan was not good at recognizing faces, he knew that the two faces were ugly to a certain level to anyone. They both had a big ugly nose and green skin all over their faces. Their hair was messy like a chicken nest. Their mouths were as big as blood plates. It was scary to look at them, just like the supervillains in horror movies. Fortunately, they were just game characters. So, Ling Pingan didn't care about the appearance of the characters. He only cared about the characters' attributes and skills. Back then, when he was in university, he did not mind playing with the twin-headed ogre mage and butcher in his dorm. Having fun was the most important thing. Therefore, he immediately summoned his attributes and skills interface and beamed with joy. Chu Weiwei only felt her vision blackout. When she woke up again, she found herself in the same fog as last time. With the experience from last time, Chu Weiwei did not run around. She just quietly stayed where she was. After about half an hour, pairs of evil eyes opened from the depths of the fog. A loud voice sounded around her, "Welcome. Nightmare game participant Pretty Weiwei, you will enter your second nightmare world to explore. Because you have already worn your nightmare silver milestone. Coattail Rider. The realm of nightmare will automatically match you with your nightmare identity, matching, L.C. Congratulations. You will obtain the identity of Fifth Doctor during this Nightmare World adventure. All the natives of Nightmare World will regard you as a noble with the title of Fifth Doctor. Your identity will allow you to gain the favor of certain nightmare characters during the exploration process. It will also allow you to gain the hostility of certain nightmare characters. Because you have already obtained the title of Fifth Doctor, your faction has been locked. Your faction is called Immortal Qin. You must complete the main quest of the Immortal Qin faction before you can return. You are about to enter the Nightmare World, good luck. The fog gradually dispersed, and Chu Weiwei discovered that she had appeared in an ancient beacon tower. It seemed to be night. Fireflies flew in from all directions and landed in front of Chu Weiwei. Then, they formed glowing words in front of her. Main quest. Repair the damaged Immortal Qin beacon tower. Then, a loud voice sounded around her again. Your silver nightmare milestone. Coattail Rider activated. Your nightmare identity in this world is Fifth Doctor. You have obtained the friendship of the Immortal Qin Expedition Team. In the eyes of all the members of the Immortal Qin Expedition Team, you are regarded as a descendant of Immortal Qin. Because of your performance in the previous Nightmare World, you have obtained a nightmare privilege. The advantage of the younger generation. You can obtain some nightmare plot hints in advance. Thus, the fireflies in front of Chu Weiwei gradually became illusory. A hazy scene appeared in front of Chu Weiwei. The ancestral dragon is missing. A voice said, I'm going to look for the ancestral dragon. He is our king, and also our monarch. Thus, in the haze, Chu Weiwei saw the owner of this voice. He brought an army and embarked on a vast path of pursuit. They crossed time and space, searching for every single trace. Suddenly, a loud explosion occurred in the fog. You betrayed us. Everything disappeared. Everything in front of Chu Weiwei gradually disappeared. Human figures began to appear in the surroundings. Chapter 94. Immortal Qin Great Wall. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 94. Immortal Qin Great Wall. Ling Pingyan was excitedly practicing his new character's skills in this square. It was really awesome. It made him extremely happy. He looked at his two arms and sighed, I'm really cruel and cunning, cunning and cruel. As with the last time, this new character could only use one skill for free. But this one skill alone was enough to make him elated. Other than that, this new character's attributes were also quite incredible. It was different from Poor Monk Fai. This new character didn't have spirit and charm. However, it was bestowed with both strength and endurance. The initial strength was as high as 30 points. 30 points of gold strength. It was indeed brutal. 20 points of gold endurance attribute was even more wicked. Ling Pingyan suspected that even if he stood still, those monsters and other players would not be able to break through his defense, especially when he could use that one free extra skill. It fit what the tattoo stated, brutal and cunning. After he briefly familiarized himself with the new character, he decided to give it a try, although that was not what he initially intended. The only problem was that he had 2 heads, 4 pairs of eyes, and 4 ears. This character's operation was a little complicated. However, Ling Pinyin believed that he could adapt to it. Thus, he couldn't wait to click on the Multiplayer Nightmare Exploration button. A whirlpool instantly appeared under the character's feet. The next second, he found himself in a place similar to a beacon tower. The shadows of the players around him slowly appeared. He also heard the notification from the Nightmare game, "Hello, dear players. You have now entered the latest official dungeon of the Nightmare Legend. Immortal Qin's Last Dream. The current mode of the Nightmare Dungeon is Peace. You cannot gain anything by killing other players." As with the previous time, he did not want to talk nonsense with other players. But he saw a familiar figure. It was the little red hand called Weiwei who came from Qing City. But this time, there was a new label on the little red hand's head. Dr. Wu. So, the moment she appeared, in a corner of the beacon tower, a pottery figurine which Ling Pinyin had initially thought was dead stood up. It walked to the little red hand and bowed. "Miss, you're finally here. Captain Meng told me to bring you to see him once you are here." Ling Pinyin immediately stopped moving forward to greet her. "I don't think I need to bring her this time. I'll take a look around this dungeon first." Ling Pinyin had been regretting it ever since he quit the game. The reason for her regret was that she only remembered to clear the dungeon and forgot to explore more places in that dungeon to farm more monsters. In the end, he only enjoyed himself for a while before he logged out of the game. If he wanted to play again, he would have to wait for a week. A week. This time, Ling Pinyin did not want to end so quickly. He planned to walk around the dungeon and find out the locations of the bosses and monsters of all sizes. Then, he would decide what to do next. Thus, as soon as he appeared, he shook his huge and burly body before springing high up from the beacon tower. Under the astonished gazes of the many players, he jumped out of the area. After that, Ling Pinyin realized that this beacon tower was built on a tall wall whose height was at least a few thousand meters. F***ck. He couldn't help but curse the Federation. Fortunately, he still had skills. In order to prevent himself from falling to his death here, he immediately activated the skill, I think LVL1. I think LVL1. Faith is power. Brother Gao and Brother Mao have endless faith. Immediately deduct a certain amount of HP, then transform anything you can find into a creature of your imagination. You can only deduct 10%/20%/30%/40% of your HP and convert it into faith. You can only use this skill when your HP is not lower than 50%. Note: Brother Mao is both cruel and cunning, while Brother Mao is both cunning and cruel. Upon hearing that, his two heads collided together. His two huge arms then spread out and flapped continuously, which made him look like a bird flapping its wings. Miraculously, his tall and strong body bore the features of a bird, thus allowing him to glide high in the sky. Despite being unrealistic, the experience was truly worthwhile. I can glide, I can finally glide. That was the only thought that occupied Ling Pinyin's mind. This experience had used up his 100 HP, but it was not considered a problem for him since he was equipped with 2000 horsepower. Moreover, his character also had a passive talent. As long as one entered a state of excitement, one's HP would recover by 1% per second. As long as one got into a combat, one's strength would increase by 1% every second. As long as one was injured, one would enter the state of excitement. This was simply a godly skill. This made Ling Pinyin suspect that the game officials had modified this character based on a certain boss. The HP that had just been deducted was restored in less than a second. Therefore, Ling Pinyin had the urge to check whether he would still be alive if he fell from such a height. This was also the instinct of the game players. They were overwhelmed with the desire to try every possibility. Fortunately, his rationality prevented him from his attempt. He did not mind the embarrassment if he fell to his death. What worried him was the possibility that he would not be able to play the game for a week, which would be very uncomfortable. Upon Chu Weiwei's arrival, a terracotta soldier who was sitting at the corner of the beacon tower came to her front. He kowtowed and said, "Mississippi. You're finally here. Captain Meng instructed me to bring you to her as soon as you arrive." With a pause, the nightmare game participants who had just appeared from the illusion cast all sorts of looks at her. There were curiosity, jealousy, greed, and outright hostility. This made Chu Weiwei slightly uncomfortable. However, in the next second, everyone's attention shifted away from her. That was because a giant that was at least 2.34 meters tall walked out from the illusion. It had two huge, strange heads on its neck and green skin all over its body. Its physique made everyone look like a dwarf in front of it. On top of its head was a huge red notification box with its nightmare code, "What the hell?" It was written in the Federation's language. Therefore, Chu Weiwei could not help but take another look. Then, this giant with two heads and green skin, who was suspected to be a participant in the Federation's game, jumped up from the beacon tower. Under everyone's gaze, he spread his arms like a giant rock and started to glide. This. Chu Weiwei looked at this figure as he passed through the clouds and gradually turned into a small dot before disappearing into the distance. The other participants of the game also gulped. Which apostle from the nightmare realm was this? Someone asked, could it be that we are going to participate in an extremely dangerous nightmare realm, in which we might be wiped out? Was that why the realm had specially dispatched an apostle? Nightmare apostles were the legends of the nightmare realm. Each of them had powerful strength and were the top combatant of the nightmare realm. The nightmare realm that they were participating in and exploring, no matter which one it was extremely dangerous. To most people, it was a terrifying world that had a 90% chance of being wiped out. Now, the realm arranged for an apostle to join the participants who were fairly new and had only joined in the nightmare realm for 3 to 5 times at most. Wasn't this clearly telling everyone that this place was very risky and that they had to be careful? Seeing that an apostle left right after he appeared, one participant cursed in fear and anger, "Why did you leave? Why did you leave us behind? If we die here, you will be the murderer." It was a female player from Qin Lu. She seemed to be in her 20s and was quite pretty. Chu Weiwei glanced at the nightmare code on her head that had not dissipated. It was a string of letters. Chu Weiwei had learned some foreign languages, so she could roughly translate it. It seemed to be something called Bloody Mary. Chu Weiwei shook her head immediately. "Let's not talk about it. Does the nightmare apostle of the Federation Empire have any obligation to help others? Even if he does, he can still reject the request." However, the words of the Qin Lu woman clearly resonated with the others. They all echoed her words. It was unknown if they were just venting or if they really thought that way. Taking the opportunity when they were all standing at the edge of the beacon tower, Chu Weiwei cursed the two-head monster that had disappeared into the distance. She then followed the terracotta warrior and entered an elevator of the beacon tower. Ka, ka, ka. The huge wooden elevator began to descend. Chapter 95. Bug. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 95. Bug gliding from thousands of meters height in the sky. The wind whispered in his ears, and his tall and sturdy body soared like a bird. Ling Pingan felt extremely good. Damn, I finally know why those rich people like to fly in gliding suits. Ling Pingan used the wind to glide between the clouds and the mountains. As he glided, he exclaimed, "This is so awesome. The game design is so realistic. When the public beta is released, I'm afraid that all the rich people in the world will go crazy for it." The land beneath him was the same as the land that Ling Pingan had once looked down from an airplane. However, in this game dungeon, there were no high-rise buildings, dams, or roads. Ling Pingan looked around. Basically, they were all valleys or canyons. Ling Pingan had flown at least 100 miles by just gliding at a high altitude for about 10 minutes. He realized that although the design of this dungeon was quite exquisite, it was a little exaggerated. The mountains here were all thousands of meters high. Each of them could probably be compatible with Mount Everest in the real world. So, will the monsters be big too? Ling Pingan thought. He began to try to land, lowering his height a little by little. After about 2 or 3 minutes of trying, Ling Pingan slowly lowered his height a little by little. When he lowered his height to about 200 meters, he received a notification. Dear player, you are trying to enter the territory of chaos. You can choose. A. I heard that Mr. Cass is engaged in outstanding scientific and technological research to improve the status of all beings. I may be able to provide a little help to Mr. Cass's research. B. Shameless old thief, how dare you to boast? Take my punch of justice. Looking at these two choices, Ling Pingan pondered for a moment before choosing B. It was not just because he liked rap and play basketball. It was also because he already had a certain degree of understanding and familiarity with the official's bad taste in the Legend of Nightmare. What kind of goddamn scientific and technological research? King improving the treatment of all living beings. Why not humans? After receiving the education of the Federal Empire, and entering the society for many years, Ling Pingan was keenly aware that something was wrong. Humans were the spirits of all living things. Therefore, we humans protect the natural environment, not for the sake of protecting the natural environment, but for the sustainable development of our future generations. If we need to sacrifice our interests or even sacrifice ourselves to protect the natural environment. Get to know Du. Get to know Wusong. The heroes of the Federal Empire had already made their choice a long time ago. If there is a flood, they will prevent it. Who cares if this flood is a part of nature? It's affecting humans. Do you understand? If a tiger pounces on a man, humans will beat it to death. They didn't care if it's a part of the natural ecological chain. They didn't care if there are unpredictable consequences if the food chain and ecology destroy if it is dead. Sure enough, just as Ling Pingan made his choice, the seemingly harmonious green mountains and rivers in front of him suddenly changed. Countless unknown smoke filled the gap between the mountains and the plains. Terrifying monsters raised their heads from these mountains and plains. They had all sorts of strange appearances, but one could still tell that they were plants and animals that had been infected by a fungus or spore. Most of them were plants. They were covered in thick mycelium, with branches or vines stretching out in a twisted manner. Most monsters had a certain ability to move. But they were not fast. Some monsters even had the ability to perform surface-to-air missile. Ling Pingan saw a few monsters that seemed to be mutated trumpet flowers. They opened their huge buds and shot spore-like things out of their mouthparts that were completely covered with some fungus. They bombarded Ling Pingan. Bang! 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 Spores exploded around Ling Pingan. Countless mycelium and dandelion-like seed-like things flew in the air. It seemed that it was the main attacks of these monsters. Sure enough, in Ling Pingan's battle record, a hint began to appear. You were attacked by a fungal bomb launched by Cass's mutated son, fungus form, level 7. You have entered combat mode. Your talent. Excitement is activated. From now on, your strength will increase by 1% per second, as long as you are still in combat mode, because you have received damaged, your HP will recover by 1% per second from now on, as long as you are still injured. Then, Ling Pingan flipped through his damage record. Cass's son of mutation, fungal form, the fungal bomb launched by the explosion near you. You have been affected by the fungal bomb. You received 10 points of damage, blast damage 9 plus 1 fungal infection damage. You are infected with a fungal infection. From now on, you will undergo a mandatory test every 15 seconds. If you fail the test, you will be randomly infected with the malignant fungal disease, fungal enteritis/histoplasmosis/penicilliosis marnophi, etc. Even if you pass the test, you may also be infected with the mild fungal disease, hand moss/beriberi/scalp moss. Because of your body condition, you are immune to all fungal/spore diseases. Therefore, you will not undergo any tests. Ling Pingan laughed as he read the hint. He continued to glide in the sky, hovering above the gorge, deliberately attracting the attacks from the monsters. That was because he seemed to have found a loophole in the game. His innate ability, excitement, would increase his strength by 1% per second after entering combat mode. At the same time, as long as he received damage, his HP would recover by 1% per second. And the bombs fired by these monsters could hardly hit him directly. Most of them exploded around him. Therefore, he would only receive 10 points of damage. That meant that he could hover high in the sky and receive damage to achieve the possibility of stacking his strength without any major damage. His strength attribute was 30 points. In other words, he could increase his strength by 0.3 points every second. 1 minute would be 18 points. 1 hour would be 144 points. 2 hours would be 288 points. And his character was still a gold attribute character. In other words, as long as he hovered in the air for more than 2 hours, and during that time, he would attract the monsters below to attack him constantly. Then, after 2 hours, his strength would stack up to a terrifying level of 318 points. At that time, even if he just pinched, it would probably cause a nuclear dot-like explosion. If he were to punch out and not destroy a mountain, Ling Pingan would feel that he had let down this terrifying power. At that time, he would be able to crush and destroy any monster he fought. Together with his skills, it was the best harvesting mode. Ling Pingan had an intuition, he would be able to make the Legend of Nightmares game planner, and the officials regret this time. Chapter 96. The purpose of the Immortal Qin Expedition Team. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 96. The purpose of the Immortal Qin Expedition Team. The creativity, imagination, and action of the game players were undoubtedly extremely powerful. Many players often played so well that even the developers were stunned. Therefore, Ling Pingan had always been proud of being one of them. And so, he glided between the canyons. The wind was his friend, allowing him to hover above the canyons effortlessly. Spore bombs and fungal bombs exploded beside him one after another. In the battle log, rows of damage notifications appeared. However, his HP did not decrease much. This was because unless he was hit by multiple spore bombs or fungal bombs within a second, his HP loss would not catch up to the speed of his passive healing. As he continued to receive damage, he began to rapidly regain strength passively. The 1% growth rate per second seemed slow, but it accumulated to great amounts. His strength attribute continued to grow. This became the thing that Ling Pingan was most focused on right now. Seeing his strength attribute continue to increase, it gave him a strong sense of satisfaction. It was as if he had returned to his childhood and had recollected pure and simple emotions. It was just like when he was playing Federal Building Blocks when he was young, when watching his points continuously increase made him very happy. It was also like when he had first come into contact with online games, when he would systematically fighting monsters in a map from morning till night just to level up. At this moment, Ling Ping was content and fulfilled. In the wooden elevator, Chu Wei Wei slowly descended. She looked at the huge rocks surrounding the elevator and the surprise in her eyes could no longer be hidden. You must be shocked. The terracotta was on the other hand used to it. This is the Great Wall that Commandant Meng had led us to build. Its height alone is more than 50 miles. Equivalent to 2,500 meters to outsiders like you. Furthermore, it was built on Mount Li. It paused before adding, it's your called Mount Li of the entering world. Therefore, the height of the entire Great Wall has already exceeded 8,000 meters. Chu Wei Wei was extremely surprised. You all know of our existence. Of course. The Terracotta said, we had already known for more than 10 years ago. We've even met you all before. A few years ago, one of your experts had entered our territory and had met with Commander Meng. He's not bad. The Terracotta praised, with your world status, it's really impressive that such a person could appear. Chu Weiwei lowered her head slightly and recalled a legend passed down among the blackguards that several years ago, the governor had stepped into Mount Li and pacified the restless Mount Li. Thinking about it, he must have come face to face with this so-called Commander Meng in this nightmare world. But what are you all? Chu Weiwei asked. The expedition team from Xianqin. Yes. The Terracotta nodded humanly. We are the expedition team that came to find our Fing. The 3rd Terracotta Army and the 2nd Bronze Legion of the Great Wall of Immortal Qin led by Commander Meng. We found traces of the ancestral dragon at the edge of the barrier to your world. We initially wanted to contact Immortal Qin immediately and call for more reinforcements. But a hint of disappointment flashed in its gem-embedded eyes. There's a traitor among us. He destroyed our communication tower, made us lose our space-time coordinates and our ability to call Immortal Qin. Chu Weiwei nodded slightly. She recalled the scene she had seen from the realm of nightmare notification. However, Chu Weiwei looked at the terracotta figure and asked, why didn't you ask me how I knew about your origins? One would know that she had known from the realm of nightmare notification. Since the terracotta figure in this realm of nightmare had intelligence, why did it not have any questions? The terracotta suddenly smiled. Its ceramic-formed face actually smiled like a human. It looked at Chu Weiwei. Because, from how we see it, you should know. Because. There was some excitement in its eyes. You have his scent on you, the scent of our monarch father. Although it's very faint, we were created by him, and so we are also lives granted by him. Even if he is completely fallen and his soul shattered, we would still be able to smell any of his scent and traces. Chu Weiwei froze. She recalled receiving the realm of nightmare notification when she entered the game. Your nightmare identity in this world is 5 doctors. You have obtained the friendship of the Immortal Qin expedition team. To all the members of the Immortal Qin expedition team, you are regarded as descendant of Immortal Qin. It was because of this. No. She immediately shook her head. Because the terracotta had clearly said. I smelled his scent on you. He should be the missing ancestral dragon of Immortal Qin that they were looking for. So. Chu Weiwei asked solemnly, how long ago was it when you smelled the scent? No more than a month. The terracotta said, at least within a month later, you have crossed paths with our monarch father, maybe you've met before, or maybe you've come into contact with one of his personal belongings, or maybe you've spoken before. The terracotta looked at Chu Weiwei, its ceramic shell beginning to heat up. But I personally feel that, perhaps you've experienced everything. Chu Weiwei's entire body shook. She had thought of a possibility. The figure of that tall and burly senior monk. Was he reincarnated? Chu Weiwei did not know. The elevator landed on the ground with a loud thud. Then, the terracotta figure walked to the front of a huge stone wall and stretched out its hand, as if verifying a certain procedure. Following that, the wall door opened. The camp outside entered her sight. In front of her seemed to be an ancient military camp. However, the soldiers here were essentially terracotta figures. When they saw Chu Weiwei, they all turned their heads and their eyes were filled with surprise. There was also a huge bronze giant that was 7 to 8 meters tall which rose up from somewhere. It walked before Chu Weiwei, squatted down, and said, "Welcome, outsider." Its voice was magnetic, making Chu Weiwei feel very comfortable. It was hard to imagine that such a huge bronze giant could actually speak like a human and be as gentle as a human. Although some power that interfered with my yin-yang universal divination and made me think that you are the bloodline of immortal Qin, I know that you are an outsider. Although your world is a little similar to ours, you are ultimately not a real immortal Qin member after all. But I still want to welcome you. I am Meng Yi, it said. I am the commander of the garrison army of the Great Wall of Immortal Qin. Under the orders of young Master Fu Su, I have come to look for our father. I am very happy that I smell the scent of our father, our king on you. It stretched out its bronze palm that was at least 1 meter wide and signaled Chu Weiwei to step up onto it. You must have a lot of questions, I will slowly answer them for you. Chapter 97. I thought you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 97. I thought in the sky, flying in the wind. One after another, fungal bombs and spore bombs exploded all around him. Ling Pingyan watched as his strength attribute continuously increased bit by bit, furthermore the rate of increase slowly rising. He felt so unexplainably great. If this continued on, I probably would be able to increase my strength to above 300 points in no more than a few minutes, he thought happily. Now, his strength attribute had already risen to 200 points. It had only been less than half an hour past since he had started to farm his strength. It was also only at this moment that he realized that the increase in his strength was also added to by the bonus of his talent. Now, his increase in strength per second was already almost 2 points. Unfortunately, there seemed to be a mechanism in this game. The explosions of the spore bombs and fungal bombs of the monsters below had already ended. Maybe it was because they had used up all their ammunition. Or it could be because there was some boss that had discovered the problem and had spontaneously stopped the monsters from wastage. Forget it. Ling Pingyan looked at the various fungi and spores hanging from all over his body. He dived down from the sky. Smack. He landed steadily on the ground, his tall sturdy body creating a huge pit in the ground. The fall had also cost him 100 points of damage. However, he shook his 2 heads and the left brain shouted, Brother Gao, I'm both cruel and very cunning. The right brain shouted, Brother Mao, I'm both cunning and very cruel. Roar. 2 huge palms slapped the thick dense hair on their chest. Ling Pingyan was shocked when he heard this and quickly asked the game official, why has my character slipped out of my control and is it speaking acting on its own? In the end, the answer he got was, Dear player, the character that you created is a character that the system had automatically created for you, therefore, when the system allocates resources, it will embed some of the character's background into the character's base level logic. When encountering certain scenarios, the character will follow the set logic and speak and act on its own. Please do not worry. This is completely normal. Ling Pingyan looked and finally understood. Was it the same setting as previously when the endgame character entered certain scenarios? Understood. He did not bother about this matter anymore and looked at his surroundings. One by one, the huge plants had already uprooted themselves. Their branches hanging with fungi and spores were slowly combining together, allowing them to gradually transform into individual monsters which were mobile on their own. Slap. A monster that seemed to have been transformed from some ancient tree formed a fist with its spore and mycelium-laden vines and slammed itself into the spot beside Ling Pingyan. This punch directly created a huge pit of at least 4 to 5 meters in depth on the ground beside Ling Pingyan. Get out of here. A humongous treant of at least tens of meters tall, covered in countless mycelium and spores on its body, revealed a mouth like wooden organ. It opened and shouted, Greenie. This is not a place you should be in. This is the place where our master prepares gifts for our great father. Ling Pingyan raised his head and saw the humongous treant. Father. Both of his heads laughed, his Zuan talent immediately activating. Don't you all have a mother? Otherwise, why didn't you mention her? I'm shivering in rage, when will mother be able to stand up? You're seeking your death. Ling Pingyan seemed to have hit a weak spot of the treant. Perhaps it was because the Trent's base level logic did not allow the word mother to be mentioned. In any case, it was angered. All the spores and fungi on the countless branches on its body began to move, one by one turning into huge fists. Slap 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 slap. These huge fists carried the wind with its countless mycelium and spores, and smashed towards Ling Pinyin. Can't take it anymore. Ling Pinyin laughed out loud. He looked at his strength which had already reached 221 points and faced the huge fists that were smashing towards him head-on. Then, he stretched out his two hands, reached forward and grabbed the two fists made of spores and fungi. Then, he gently flexed and the two fists were absolutely annihilated. The fungal mycelium and spores scattered in the air and landed all over the ground. Just this. Ling Pinyin became arrogant. He indeed had the right to be arrogant. With a total of 221 points of gold strength attribute, each of his attacks would cause a terrifying damage of up to 2,210 points. With such a huge amount of strength, it was more than enough to crush any enemy. This made his attacks carry the triple effect of crushing, critical strike, and absolute destruction. His damage would in fact have already exceeded 6,000 points. Ling Pinyin remembered that in the previous version, the HP of the final closing boss, Princess Miraudon, was not even 20,000. It could only take 3 of his current punches. And so, Ling Pinyin casually waved his fists and hit the air in front of him wildly. Smack smack smack. The fungal fists that came at him one after another were all smashed by him. At that moment, a few little monsters with closed eyes crawled out from underground. These bugs that seemed to be parasitized by spores or fungi spat waves of dark green poison at him. Don't y'all know that small fries will be murdered if they interfere when the big boss is fighting? The damage of the poison was not high, only causing around 1 to 5 points of toxic damage. However, Ling Pinyin was sprayed all over. This made him very upset. Thus, he stomped heavily on the ground with both his feet. The huge force caused the entire ground to collapse. At this moment, his strength had already reached a terrifying 235 points. With one stomp, all the bug monsters underground were massacred. Countless kill notifications began to flood the screen. However, Ling Pinyin did not have the time to look. He looked towards the humongous Treant. He knew that this monster must be the boss of this region. Because, it had a name. Fungal Treant Commander Karachi. And it was golden in color. You just punched me so many times. Ling Pinyin effortlessly grabbed 2 little blind tree monsters into his hands. Now it's time for me to return the favor. He immediately activated his skill. Me think LVL1. After losing 100 HP, he distortedly twisted the 2 little tree monsters into a cannonball. Take this, his 2 heads shouted. Then, he threw the cannonball in his hand. The skill he used had turned it into a bomb that was widely used in the Northern Yin Shang War of Liberation 300 years ago. Now that he had already increased his strength to a humongous 250 points, he threw the cannonball like a lightning. Dio! The bomb released a sonic boom that surpassed the speed of sound. In the next second, it smashed into the humongous Treant who was too late to dodge. Boom! A huge explosion came from the Trent's trunk. Then, the towering Treant swayed, its huge body breaking bit by bit. Smash! It collapsed. Chapter 98. Hope you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 98. Hope standing on the palm of the bronze giant, who called himself the captain of Immortal Qin, Meng Yi, Chu Weiwei was brought to another beacon tower beside the military camp. The bronze giant looked clumsy. But it was extremely agile. When it flew, it was not propelled by fuel. Instead, it was propelled by the rune arrays carved on the bronze parts of its enormous body. These formations complemented each other and emitted waves of psionic radiance, causing the gigantic bronze giant's body to become as light as a feather, completely breaking away from the constraints of gravity. That allowed it to fly up to the beacon tower of thousands of meters in height easily like a bird. The beacon tower was an outlet that protruded out of the entire defensive system. Therefore, the defensive and guard forces there were obviously stronger. The terracotta warriors there alone were dozens of troops. There were 2 bronze giants, which were at least 6 meters tall and were responsible for monitoring the north and south. At the same time, 2 enormous objects that looked like ancient machinery crossbows were on the beacon tower. However, these seemingly ancient weapons were engraved with countless rune arrays. Clearly, the power of both of these machinery crossbows should not be underestimated. Look! Meng Yi placed Chu Weiwei, who was on his palm down on the watchtower on the beacon tower. Then, he twisted a component and placed something that looked like a telescope in front of Chu Weiwei. This is what we are guarding against here. The oldest, evilest, and the most terrifying monster from the chaos. The most favored lackey of the evil god known as Nurgle. The father of the plague, Cass, and his plague army. Through the binoculars, Chu Weiwei saw the scene outside the Great Wall. Under the huge mountains, the mycelium was everywhere like a spider web. Countless small monsters were moving, densely within. There were monsters with thick juices flowing out of their bodies, and their bodies were covered in all kinds of herpes. They were lying under the rocks of the mountains. They laid there lazily, not moving at all. However, the thick juices flowing out of their bodies corroded the rocks and made them smoke. Your world is fragile, Meng Yi said. The world barrier and protection mechanism seem to have been destroyed. I suppose some terrifying war had happened in your world. The war tore apart the barriers of the entire world, almost tearing the world apart too. A world like this, whether it's chaos or something else, is something they would like to invade. But, the bronze giant, Meng Yi suddenly said in a deep voice, for some reason, until we arrived, no one else seemed to have discovered the problems in your world. Perhaps it was because of our arrival that your world was discovered by the outside world. In short, the father of the plague followed us here, it said seriously. That is a terrible monster. If he breaks through our defense line, he will enter your world and spread the plague and disease to every corner. This is his master, and the only thing that the god he worships asks him to do. All things are rotten, and all beings will be immortal. These deformed monsters think that every living being in every world is equal. Therefore, viruses, bacteria, fungi, spores, plants, animals, and humans are all equal death, equal reproduction, equal decay, and equal degeneration. L.C. Listening to Meng Yi's description, she looked at everything in front of her. Chu Weiwei's could not help but tremble. The foot-and-mouth disease that Beizhou encountered last time was like a drizzle, compared to these. If these monsters happened to step into the world she lived in, Chu Weiwei did not dare to imagine what it would bring to the future. Moreover, the bronze giant said, there are traitors in your world. They are colluding with the father of the plague. These bastards have no idea what kind of evil and terror they are facing. They still think that these monsters are the same as them, but how can they understand the thoughts of Nurgle and his followers and claws? In the eyes of these lunatics, be it humans, monsters, or even themselves, they are all equal. They should all rot. Chu Weiwei recalled the Blood River Overlord, Alucard from the previous Nightmare World, and the Sodot called Moradon the Princess Pestilence. She nodded seriously and said to the bronze giant, then, respected Captain Meng, is there anything we can help you with? Help you repair the communication beacon tower of Immortal Qin that was destroyed by the mole. That was her main mission. Repair. Meng Yi's bronze face was gloomy. It can't be repaired anymore. The mole sent by Zhao Gao did not only destroy it. He also opened the defense system and put the claws of Nurgle in. See that? He pointed to the mountains in the north. That was our defense line too. It was also where the beacon tower was located. Now, Karachi, the leader of the fungus treant who was nurtured by the father of the plague, is entrenched there. With our current strength, we can only barely hold on to this backup defense line, and unable to recover the lost land before. So, it said to Chu Weiwei, the thing I want to ask you to do is, to find our king, our father. The great ancestral dragon. You've seen him. You'll find him. No matter what state he's in now, I'll have a way to wake him up in a short time, as long as you bring him here. As long as the ancestral dragon wakes up, even if it's just for a second, all the problems can be solved. Once the holy ancestral dragon wakes up, it could return to its position. It could immediately establish a connection with Immortal Qin and summon its loyal Bronze Legions and Terracotta Army to fight everything. However, Chu Weiwei didn't seem to hear him. She looked at the telescope in front of her in a daze. What's wrong? Meng Yi noticed that and asked. Look. Chu Weiwei turned the telescope to Meng Yi. Meng Yi was puzzled and looked at the telescope. Then, his bronze face became extremely strange. Because, in the binoculars, under the mountains in the north, countless monsters seemed to be chased by something. The huge body of Karachi, the giant fungus treant that once occupied the area and made Meng Yi afraid to act rashly, had fallen to the ground. It was obviously dead. And with its death, the defense line of Immortal Qin, which was once occupied by fungi in spores, had once again appeared in front of the world. Although it had become extremely dilapidated. But Meng Yi saw the possibility of recovering the occupied communication beacon tower and repairing it. Once the communication beacon tower was repaired, it could immediately contact Immortal Qin. And ask young Master Fu Su to send reinforcements immediately. Chapter 99. Whack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 99. Whack. Looking at the treasure chests that were strewed all over the ground, Ling Pingan scratched his head and contacted the Nightmare Legends official. Why don't you guys introduce the one.click-pick.up function? That's right. There were so many chests from the monsters. If he were to pick them up one by one, it would take a long time for him to finish picking them up. If he could activate the one.click-pick.up and one.click-sales function. Wouldn't that save much trouble? A moment later, he received an official reply from Nightmare Legend. Dear player, we have received your opinion. Thank you for your suggestion. Wish you a happy game. Ling Pingan could tell at a glance. The standard official language was almost the same as saying, your opinion is good, but we will not change it. That was basically how the stupid game official acts. Especially, the game designers and operators, who always felt that their designs were flawless, brilliant, and unrivaled, and the opinions from players were dispensable. Ling Pingan was already used to these stupid designs and operations. So, he just shrugged. If you don't want to change it, then don't change it. Anyway, the duration of the power that had just been spawned was almost up. He would just open the box. 10 minutes later, Ling Pingan looked at the things he had picked up in his bag with a strange expression. What are these? He could not help but complain. He had worked hard to open the box, but he did not get any coupons or equipment. Most of them were materials and goods, or mission items. These raw materials and sundries were basically mutant spore fruits, mutant fungus mushrooms, and so on. The selling price was not bad. Basically, they could be sold for 20.30 points each. Ling Pingan sold all of them and unexpectedly got around 5,000 points in coupons. Adding the coupons he obtained from killing monsters, he managed to get around 10,000 points in total. Then, there was the quest item, that was obtained from the gold treasure chest dropped from that fungus treant leader, Karachi. It was a gold-attributed quest item. Its name was Green Skin Transformation Plan. After Ling Pingan opened it, he received a quest. Rescue. Quest description. Mr. Cass missed his father very much. He wanted to regain his father's love very much. For this, Mr. Cass came up with a genius idea. He took more than 100 green skins from one of the territories of green skin. From these cute little guys, Mr. Cass got a lot of inspiration. Maybe you can talk to Mr. Cass. Kidnapping others was not a good habit. Use love and justice to influence Cass. Mission objective. Rescue the members of the Tomahawk tribe who were kidnapped and enslaved by Cass. Reward. You will receive a clan tribe. Description. A clan tribe is a special design of the Nightmare Legend. When your reputation in the clan tribe reaches the level of blindly following, you can instruct them to do whatever you want. Nightmare Legend official tip. Dear player, have you heard of the Emperor? Yes, after having a clan tribe, you will be their king. Looking at this quest, Ling Pingon frowned strangely. Then, he chose to accept it. When he accepted this quest, it seemed to trigger a certain scene. Oh. His left brain said, I'm going to stun that little bean sprout in the front. The right brain shouted, I'm going to stun that little bean sprout in the back. Both brains shouted at the same time, whack. That caused Ling Pingon to receive a system notification. Dear player, your character what the hell has entered the whack state. From now on, every time you defeat 1000 enemies, you will gain a stack of whack status. Every time you gain a stack of whack status, all of your skill consumption will be reduced by 10%. At the same time, all of your damage will be increased by 10%, and your HP recovery speed will be increased when you are excited. At the same time, your strength increasing efficiency will be increased when you are in an injured state. You can stack up to 15 layers of whack status. Under whack status, you will receive a brutal mark for every leader enemy you defeat. Under whack status, you will receive a cunning mark for every leader enemy you humiliate. Brutal mark. A mark of honor. The more brutal marks you have, the more brutal you will be. Cunning mark. A mark of honor. The more cunning marks you have, the more cunning you will be. Description. Brother, what is both brutal and cunning? Brother, hell is both cunning and brutal. Ling Pingon looked at this hint and felt inexplicable, but he also felt very excited. It was as if he was going to do something that he couldn't be happier. If that's the case, he shook his two brains and let them crash into each other. Feeling the pain caused by the collision of his brains, Ling Pingon became even more excited. Let's go to whack then. Therefore, he took out a few miscellaneous items that looked like they were used. They were all high-quality silver-quality items, and it felt like a loss to throw them into the shop. Ling Pingon might as well try if they could be reused. One of them was dropped by a monster. It was called the Damaged Immortal Qin Chariot. It was an ancient chariot made of bronze that was about 2 meters long. However, the chariot was too damaged. A few of its wheels and internal parts had been broken by someone. It was no longer useful. It was probably no different from a pile of scrap metal. Therefore, the Nightmare Legend only gave a recovery price of lesser than 500 points for that item. The other two were goods that came from the treasure chest of Karachi, the leader of the Fungus Traiant army. One was called the Dimensional Core of the Storm Demon Rat, which was a strange-looking stone. The other was called the Fungal Powered Pump, which looked like a water pump. Ling Pingon looked at the three junk and thought for a moment before activating his skill, I think. LV1. After deducting 200 HP, the three junk began to merge under Ling Pingon's nose. A few seconds later, a strange car that looked like a convertible, but had 4 bronze wheels appeared in front of Ling Pingon. Ling Pingon tried to sit on it. He received a notification, "Dear player, you have entered the vehicle." Then, he realized that this thing could move. And it wasn't slow at all. However, the thing was not moved based on burning gasoline or coal. It burned spores and fungi as fuel. Moreover, it had to burn fungi or spores that were above silver quality. Ling Pingan really couldn't figure out how these fungi and spores could be used as fuels for the vehicle. Moreover, the way they were burned was the same as the coals that were added to an old-fashioned coal-burning train from 100 years ago. Ling Pingan manually stuffed the spores or fungi into the power pump that was integrated into the rear of the car. Then, the thing would huff and puff and burn the spores or fungi, turning them into power. Through the stone that had already embedded into the bottom of the car, it would start working, driving this patchwork, tattered-like vehicle to run wildly. After observing it for a while, Ling Pingan, who did not understand how the thing worked, suddenly realized, how am I going to find logic in this game? Finding logic in the game was as absurd as reading novels and studying history. Chapter 100. Peace Chariot 1.0, Gone. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 100. Peace Chariot 1.0, Gone. Driving the vehicle that Ling Pingan himself named Peace Chariot. Ling Pingan recklessly sped between the vast mountain gorges. The vehicle he was driving sped nearly 300 kilometers per hour, from the data shown in the Legend of Nightmare. It was almost at the speed of sound. Moreover, the area was a valley or mountain area. However, sitting in the vehicle was not bumpy at all. Which was not scientific at all. What was even more unscientific was the off-road performance of this vehicle. No matter how steep the slope was, no matter how bumpy the road surface was, it would just dash across it. What was even more exaggerated was that driving was extremely simple. Ling Pingan only needed to use his mind to control and could immediately perform the acceleration, deceleration, turning, and other operations. If this kind of vehicle could be invented in real life, Ling Pingan thought to himself, wouldn't the rich go crazy over it? Even in the game, Ling Pingan felt that the rich would go crazy over it. The only problem was that the durability of this thing was dropping rapidly. Basically, it would drop 5 points of durability after running for 1 minute. Therefore, Ling Pingan only enjoyed it for less than 20 minutes before this thing shattered into a pile of bronze trash. The first generation of the Peace Chariot was gone. Why was it the first generation? Because Ling Pingan had already targeted the parts for the second generation Peace Chariot. He jumped onto a cliff and looked down at the valley. Thick smoke billowed inside, and countless chimneys stood there. What caught Ling Pingan's attention the most were the 4 enormous metal objects placed in the center of the camp. Each of these 4 objects was at least as big as the wheels of the trucks that specialize in transporting ores in the mine. Moreover, they were round and had the potential to be used as wheels. Ling Pingan looked at them and rubbed his hands. He said, they can definitely be the wheels. He then looked at the humanoid objects that were moving around in the camp. These things were covered with all kinds of strange sarcomas, and green and black juices flowed out of their bodies from time to time. With every step, they looked like they were going to die. But even so, these monsters kept moving things like glass bottles and crockery. They moved these things into the chimney-like buildings. Who knew what they were producing? But it was definitely not anything good. Ling Pingan couldn't help but felt pity as he watched. So pitiful, why don't I help you escape? The 2 brains of his shook as they automatically shouted, whack. Then, Ling Pingan jumped off the cliff. Bang! His well-built body directly smashed a big dent in the ground. He also directly smashed a few monsters that were carrying some glass jars to death. These little things were too fragile. A few of them were dead with just Ling Pingan sitting on them. The impact of landing on the ground killed a few more. It was not that he was too powerful, but the levels of these monsters were too low. They were all monsters of LV1 or LV2, and their HP was incredibly low. They only had 10 HP. In other words, even if Ling Pingan did not land, they would not live for long either. The only problem was that after these monsters died, their bodies exploded immediately. The explosion was not minor. Just as Ling Pingan landed, he saw that the battle notifications were filled with pestilence damage, poison damage, and voodoo damage. Only then did he know that the names of these little things were for voodoo-modified Nurgle spirits. These unremarkable little monsters had backstory descriptions like the bosses. However, Ling Pingan did not have the time to read because his 2 brains and 4 eyes had already seen that countless monsters had crawled out from numbers of chimneys and cellars. They were all densely packed with this kind of voodoo-modified Nurgle spirits. Their bodies were about the same size as a 4 to a 5-year-old child. Their bodies were covered in sarcomas, and the sarcomas were filled with densely packed tiny bugs and pus secreted by these bugs. After these things discovered Ling Pingan, they removed the sarcomas that were filled with pus and bugs from their bodies or the bodies of their companions nearby and threw these sarcomas at Ling Pingan, like basketball players shooting hoops. Tap. 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 Before Ling Pingan could even stand up, at least several hundred sarcomas were thrown at him. His sight was occupied by these disgusting sarcomas. Although I also like playing basketball. Ling Pingan said, "You guys are going too far. Wasn't there a rule that only one newbie player is allowed on the basketball court?" But he glanced at the damage recorded in the battle log just now. It was basically only 1 point. It was because the system deducted the HP by force. In other words, the sarcoma damage thrown by these little things might not be as fast as his passive health recovery speed. So, he abruptly stood straight on the spot. He let the sarcomas hit on him. Tap. 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 Hundreds of sarcomas hit him, but most of them failed to hit him. They only exploded in the surroundings. Only a few hit Ling Pingan. It seemed that these little monsters not only liked to play basketball, but their skills were very bad. The only problem was that they were too unhygienic. Hundreds of sarcomas hit Ling Pingan's surroundings and shattered one after another. The pus and bugs inside were blasted everywhere. Ling Pingan's body was crawling with all kinds of small bugs and covered in sticky liquid. It made him feel a little uncomfortable, but he felt inexplicably good physically. It seemed that the body liked this kind of environment. And such an attack was indeed terrifying. It made Ling Pingan's HP start go up and down like riding on a roller coaster. It fluctuated between 1600.1800 for at least a few seconds before it slowly recovered. But it was still unable to recover fully. Because, after these sarcomas exploded, the voodoo magic damage along with it was sustained. Normally, the duration was as long as 15 seconds, and some could even last for a minute. This won't do. Ling Pingan thought. Although he had passive HP recovery, he couldn't afford to waste so much time. Thus, before the monster's second wave of sarcomas attack arrived, he immediately activated his skill, I think. LVL1. He casually picked up 2 broken glass jars from the ground and transformed them into a shield. Holding the shield, he directly charged into the small monsters. These so-called voodoo-modified Nurgle spirits were too weak. They were useless in close combat. Ling Pingan charged in safely like a heavy tank crushing a bunch of ants. There was no need to put in any effort. He didn't even need to take action. These monsters died one after another. Then, they exploded one after another. Pus and bugs flew everywhere from the sarcomas. The terrifying part was that if one of them died, it would cause the death of the monsters around them as well. One explosion would kill all the monsters around them. For a moment, the entire camp was like a firecracker festival, crackling non-stop.